just if this is the first time that you've been dealing with Zoom, which seems crazy, but I know that some of you are working it with Google Meet or Teams. So just your toolbar down at the bottom of your screen gives you access to everything you need. Your mute and unmute is your microphone and your camera, your start and stop for the video. And if you are having any kind of technical difficulties, don't hesitate to just leave the meeting when you can see that big leave button and then come back in. We'll just be manning the waiting room, so we'll be ready for you when you rejoin us. Our outcomes today include understanding maker-centered learning, knowing the benefits of maker-centered learning, experiencing that. We would like to give you some opportunity to do a few things that really look at how literacy and making are connected. We don't often think of them this way, but Judy and I have been lucky to have taken part in a summer of lit labs that join literacy and STEM and making, so that we see just a great benefit to those connections. We'll give you some strategies and hopefully, like we said, be able to draw some connections at the end of our session together. All of our sessions this summer are really connected to this idea of the whole child. As we come back to school, we know that we've got all kinds of different situations that we're walking into, whether our students have been side by side with us in the classroom, masked, socially distanced, etc., or if we're looking at bringing them back after a year of Zooming or working on Teams or Google Meet, we know that they're going to need that extra bit of social emotional help from us as they reacclimate, and we need some of it too. So what we are looking at is this whole child, not just a child in front of us that we need to move forward educationally, but we need to think about their physical health, their emotional health, how they're involved with their communities and their families. And this is part of Michigan's effort at continuous improvement. Instead of those school improvement plans, we now have these continuous improvement plans, and they're really the foundation of those plans is the idea of the whole child. So we want to think about too that we really can't get at the Bloom's taxonomy until we reach that Maslow piece for our students. We really want to think about how are we tapping in, how are we looking at them as individuals and building a sense of community in our classrooms, but also a safe place in our classrooms for them to learn. And we look at things like focusing in on a strong sense of belonging in those relationships that are at the backbone of everything that goes on in our classrooms. We can accelerate learning when we have a trusting atmosphere, an atmosphere that says to our students, we believe you can. And finally, we look at all those connected things. We can't have one kind of without the other. So the social is connected to the cognitive, is connected to the physical, is connected to the academic. So we want to think again about how to get to know that individual student, fill that child up with all of the different things he or she needs to be successful in our classrooms this year. And I think it's more important that we do it this year than maybe ever before, just because the last 20 months or so have been so unnatural when it comes to human connections. And we want to keep those kind of just that knowledge at the forefront as we begin to interact again in the new school year. And we have a wonderful consultant here at RESA, Cynthia Cook. You've got her phone number and her email address. So if you want any more information or you want to look at an upcoming Blitz session, I believe upcoming, I've lost complete track of days, so I'm not sure if August 20th is ahead or behind me at this point, which is really sad to say. But if that is coming up, please join. But do know too that we are recording all of these sessions. So even if you've missed one, you can always go back to what will be a library of videos for you to use at your convenience. And I'm going to pass it over to Judy.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So we're going to just do a brief little connector with all of you. So probably the one way that would make it better is if you are in gallery view. So if you can see everybody like the Brady Bunch makes this one a little bit better. So what I'm going to ask, is for you all to turn off your cameras, and we're going to just go through some prompts. And if you feel like that prompt is speaking to you, if you could turn your camera on. So I'm going to turn my camera off as well. And all right, so the first one is to turn your camera on, show yourself if you believe yourself to be a maker. All right, a few of you. All right, great. Turn your cameras off and show yourself if you enjoy cooking. A little less. I would show mine if I liked eating, but I'm not cooking. So go ahead, turn your cameras off. Show yourself if you've ever remodeled something in your home. If you've ever remodeled something in your home. All right, it's like our two top rows there, at least on my screen. All right, cameras off. Show yourself if you plant a garden. Any gardeners here? A few. We've had lots of rain. It's a good season, hopefully this summer. All right, cameras off. Couple more. Show yourself if you scrapbook or want to scrapbook. Wish you had more time to scrapbook. All right, a few. Awesome. Okay, cameras off. Show yourself if you cross stitch or embroider or do something with fabric. You have anybody in the house that does that? All right, one. Awesome. Okay, turn your camera off. Show yourself if you are a blogger or blog or write or something online that's visible. All right, Laura. Awesome. Okay, last one. Going back full circle to our very first question, show yourself if you believe yourself to be a maker. And by that, if you had your camera on for anything that I asked, then you are a maker. Awesome. All right. Thank you for being a part of that. And I saw in the chat that somebody asked, what is a maker? So that is what that is a perfect segue into what we're going to do next. But we wanted to do this connector not only to get us started, but also to get you to start seeing things through the lens of a maker and possibly in ways that you hadn't thought of before. So if you think about where you're at now, think about maybe some of those questions that we asked, think about being a child, thinking about things that maybe you made. In the chat, just share out some of the things that you can recall that might be related to making of some sort. And your head might be going towards anything that we already mentioned. It could go towards something that is arts and craftsy of some sort. So just take a moment and put in the chat, what are some of your earliest maker memories? And I won't put mine in my chat, but if I were typing, what I would have put is I remember making those little woven hot pads that, much to the chagrin of any human that knew me, got one of those as a gift. So Lincoln logs, making paperweights, making mud pies. Love that. Different baking goods. Oh, latch hooks. Oh my gosh, I've thought of those in a long time. Art class, making things with paper mache, lots of fun, messy things. Yeah. So lots of doing. And I can't see all of you right now, but here's my hope is that as you're going down memory lane, thinking of those things that you've made, that hopefully maybe it's even bringing a smile to your face. Shrinky things. Oh, I love those. That makes me think of something that my mom, we used to get the plastic cups, and we'd put things in them and then we'd set them on a cookie pan and put them in the oven. I'm sure that it was very toxic, and we're all still here to talk about it, but it made for some pretty creative shrunken things in our stove. But again, hopefully you are also coming up with some memories of your childhood or beyond that you remember because you were actively involved in that process. And so what Laura and I are hoping to do today is to maybe expand upon that knowledge of your understanding of what making is and maker-centered learning is, and then make those connections to literacy. And again, hopefully that you'll see is that we're not adding one more thing to your plate, but you're looking at what you're already doing and adding a twist to it. So with that, all of this stems and grows that creativity in all of us. And many of you are probably familiar with Sir Ken Robinson. He's one of my favorites, but he is well known for his TED Talk on creativity. And he was really an advocate for getting kids doing, and argued that kids don't grow into artistic creativity, but they actually are educated out of it by our school systems. And so what we're trying to do is to provide opportunities to bring that creativity back, give them opportunities to be creative. And then what we would challenge for you is to have that growth mindset and to really think about ways that you are creative. I mean, especially as teachers, you guys design creative learning experiences every day for your kids, but to also challenge yourself. If you are somebody that's ever said, I'm not creative, I am guilty of doing that. I am working to stop saying that, because if you're saying I'm not creative, you're kind of putting that dark cloud over you to begin with. But if you're saying that, but yet expecting your kids to be creative, it's a very mixed message. And so maybe you're not a Picasso, maybe you're not somebody who can create eloquent artwork or pottery, but you're creative in different ways. So I would challenge you to rephrase it to be, we want to be thinking creatively and developing that growth mindset, and knowing that there are a lot of opportunities in different ways that we can instill creativity. Because the reality is, whether it be something that you put in the chat of a childhood maker memory, something that we did in our opening connector, but the more that you engage in a creative experience, the more creative you get. And so we want to build in as many of those experiences into our kids' day as we can. And again, this isn't one more thing to add to your already busy plates. What we're trying to do is intersect it with the curriculum that you're already engaged with your students, and giving them authentic and meaningful ways to build upon those skills that we know that they need for life, and especially around creativity, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, and all of those things that we know our kids need for jobs that don't yet exist. And so what is this maker-centered learning? If you're new to it, this book is it's a few years old, but it was a research study done out of Harvard with Project Zero and Agency by Design. And they basically took case studies across the country to study when people were incorporating maker-centered learning into their classrooms, and looking at what were some of the characteristics of things that made it successful and what were the conditions in which they did that. And their results that came back were surprising for them, because what they expected to see was a lot of curriculum gains and a lot of content knowledge growth. And what they found was that the primary benefits of maker-centered learning was that it really helped to develop student agency, which we know is when kids are doing things that are meaningful and relevant to themselves. It's driven by their interests. It gives them a lot of voice and choice over what they're learning, which ultimately then builds their confidence, which then transfers into other areas of interest, particularly in our case, we're going to say reading and writing and building character. And so a lot of these might be in that soft skills category, but these are the things that we know can be applied to anything that they do in the present, but also our skills that we want to develop in the future. And again, when you're working around this maker-centered learning, it really gives them some authentic opportunities to engage in all of these things, where it's very student driven and not teacher driven. The secondary benefits that they learned from this study was that it did help to cultivate some of their content knowledge, because what it was doing was it was sparking their interest, and then that transferred into some of these different areas. And so not only from a content standpoint, but in the process too, if they were looking at specific skill sets, so whether it be a specific tool or programming or designing, it was cultivating a whole nother skill set for them as well. And so basically their conclusion is that there's a lot of benefits to kids who are engaged in maker-centered learning. We know, especially the last 20 months where kids have been on technology more than ever, there's a lot that kids can do, but oftentimes they are in the realm of being consumers. And so this provides them opportunities. We want to get them creating. We want them to be thinking differently. We want them to be a part of the process, and giving them opportunities to design and to invent and to innovate and to just be thinking differently about things. And again, giving them those authentic opportunities to collaborate, not because, the teacher said, like, you must talk about X, Y, and Z. it's just authentic collaboration because they're working towards a common goal, a common challenge, a common problem. And then again, as I mentioned, it does build their student agency. And so again, we want them exploring. It fosters their curiosity and iterative thinking, which we're going to take a look at design thinking, but it goes into engineering design. I mean, there's so many avenues and so many positive benefits of doing this that we're excited to share with you. And so we're going to be making that connection to literacy. And so begin thinking of literature or the stories that you're using with your kids as a vehicle for making. So again, we're not adding one more thing to your plate. We're saying do what you're already doing, but let's add a design twist to it. And so by doing that also, we're sparking interest into science, STEM concepts. And so whether it be books that we're going to share with you as a part of this project, or books that you already have in your classroom, or books that will yet to be recommended to you, just start looking for ways that you can remix what you're doing, rewire, rejuvenate yourself and your kids to into like the existing instructional strategies that you're already using to bring these stories to life and to just help them see making and STEM connections in the world around them. So through all of that nutshell, hopefully what you're hearing is it's not about a specific space, a specific tool, it's just about the learning. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Laura.
This fits in nicely with what Michelle just added to the chat. It's not about adding to your plate, it's about rearranging the things on your plate. And really this ties in, the literacy essentials are kind of the driving set of documents in the state for literacy instruction. It's 10 instructional practices that for the K-5 we should be working on every day in every classroom to reach every child, but none of them are like, what, I've never heard of this before. They're, you know, giving kids ample opportunities to read and read diverse and you know, interesting texts that connect to them and their lives, and also show them other people's lives, giving them time to write, giving them time to interact with others socially by, you know, engaging in academic discourse. But these literacy essentials, if you just look at the intentional and standards aligned instruction in disciplinary writing, we want to provide students with practice in writing in different modalities, that they get to explore different tools. They get an opportunity to create something that's not just a handwritten document or even a typed document. We've got so much that we've learned in this last year, Book Creator, Flipgrid, you know, the list goes on and on. My students love to make video trailers of things. And it was just, this is writing, but this is being presented in a different medium. And we too want to get and give them opportunities to explore and use these digital tools, because they will be digital citizens. They're going to emerge into the workplace and need to have maybe not familiarity with Flipgrid, but they might need to know how to navigate taking a video of themselves and putting that into a particular platform so they're able to reach an audience of their coworkers, their customers, whatever that might be. So these all give us opportunities to explore that. And they're also, that, you know, that concept of maker is also aligned with the ISTE standards. We know that our students need to, just like I said, be a digital citizen. They need to be innovative. They need to think, you know, by computing. I think about all of the different things that we do on a daily basis, especially since COVID, you know, has changed the way that we do what we do on a daily basis. We want to empower them. We want to empower their creativity. So really, again, it's not something that's added on. It's something that we're doing already, but we might want to think of some creative, innovative, different ways of doing these so that we give our students more tools that they'll use undoubtedly as they emerge into secondary education, post-secondary education, and beyond.
Okay, and then what we're going to do is, again, just remind everybody that creativity is a mindset, not an art set. So we all are creative and we're going to think creatively. And so Laura and I are going to spend some time sharing some different ideas to give you sort of a menu of choices on how you might be able to begin thinking differently about some of the work that you're already doing. And so one of the resources that we're going to share is called Promoting STEM Through Literature. And so this is a sampling of the books. There's 3 new ones that we're adding this year that we don't have the materials together yet because we've just announced the books. But this is a way for you to take some really high quality literature and look at it through the lens of innovation and creativity. And there are questions that we have put together already for you around igniting a conversation with that. There are some maker challenges that are already a part of that. And then this whole project is really rooted in design thinking. So I'm going to give you the 2-minute overview, and then we're going to give you some time just to explore the website a little bit. This is a workshop in and of itself. We just want to make you aware of it at this point. And so when you go to the website, you will see the book jacket covers for all the books, the current 3 that are not listed yet, because like I mentioned, they're still in the making. Magic Ramen, The Wood, Wings, and Wire, and The Boy Who Thought Outside the Box will be added shortly. But essentially, any one of these, you could simply click on the book jacket cover and it will take you to a Google folder that inside there is a design thinking journal. There's a task card that gives you a brief summary of the book, along with some questions that you can have to help kids see making in STEM and the world around them, and then a challenge. But as I mentioned before, a big part of this project is rooted in design thinking. And again, we can do a whole workshop on just design thinking, but if you're not familiar with it, essentially what design thinking is it's a human-centered approach to solving problems that are human-centered, not problem-centered. And so that begins with empathy and looking at things through the lens of the person or people that you are designing for. And so this is a journal that scaffolds what that is, especially if you're in the infancy of introducing that to your students. And so this is there. And then each book has a task card where, again, I mentioned that there's a little summary, some of the STEM connections that are woven throughout there, and questioning. And then there's always a maker challenge that's intentionally sweet, short, to the point, and simple, because you can make this be whatever you want to be. A question that we often get asked is, what grade level is this geared toward? And so I would say K-12. So we've intentionally not put grades with any particular book, because anything here can be scaffolded up or down depending on the level of your kid. So, younger kids might be developing things and prototyping things with paper and cardboard, depending on what it is. With the older kids, you might be getting into more, 3D printing, programming, designing, more sophisticated prototypes. I mean, the research that you do. So everything can be scaled up or down. And then each book also has a page of some additional resources. And so a lot of the things that are here, depending on the book, there might be a little, there might be a lot. So even if this was a resource that you were using, if you found materials that you think would be beneficial to be added here, please share. But also, all of this is Creative Commons. So anything that we have here, you can take and make better. And so, or different to fit your needs. And so down here at the bottom, one of our early users of this, they saw the journal and they said, that's really great, but that's not going to work for my little kids. Can I modify that to be more suitable for, early L? And we're like, absolutely. So they did, and they put the Creative Commons license right back on there, which is what's linked here below. So that's just an example how people can take this and make improvements upon it to fit your needs. And that in and of itself is making. So that is this in a nutshell. So what we would like to do is give you a few minutes to just explore the site, maybe take a look at the questions, look at the challenges, and just begin to get your wheels spinning on how you might be able to use literature to bring in making and STEM connections all of these books, I should say one last thing, all of these books, except for Claymates and The Most Magnificent Thing, are all based on true stories. So you can also bring in the fact that these are not random fiction characters. These are real people who've done real things, and make that connection as well. As far as any of them are bilingual, that's a great question, Vicki. I don't know the answer to that, but that is definitely something for me to look into. So I know Laura's been putting the link in the chat. So like I said, we'd like to give you a few minutes just to do some exploration on your own right now on this site. And if you have any questions, like you've already been doing, please feel free to add them in the chat or unmute, and we can help you with that. Okay, so hopefully you found maybe one thing that maybe you can bring to your classroom. Oh, Michelle, thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that all of these books are here at Wayne RESA that you can borrow. So if there's anything that you need, we have 3 copies of all the books, so we have lots of books to be shared. So that's one thing. So thank you for mentioning that. And the other thing is some of the items that were mentioned in the Maker Challenge are also things that can be borrowed here from Wayne RESA. So if you saw anything that said Dash Robots or Spheros, we have all that here. That's something that I can share out as a follow-up, but yeah, so we have all those materials here. If you don't have access to those in your own building at this time, they can all be borrowed like a library book. They can be borrowed for a period of time so that you can plan ahead of time as well too. So we do have all those. So thanks for bringing that up. Oh, okay, Vicki, thank you for that with the Spanish version. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna jump into just a few more ways that you might be able to, you know, reimagine how you utilize some making strategies into your existing curriculum. And so some of you may have heard of book snaps. You've probably heard of Snapchat. And so Tara Martin is somebody who was trying to make connections with her students and was entering them in their world, which they're into Snapchat. So she met them where they were and had them looking at ways to take what she was already doing and adding a layer of doing to it. And so she came up with this way that doesn't have to use Snapchat, just having kids taking a picture of their text. And so you're already possibly having your kids doing some annotating of their text. Well, we're just adding a different twist to it and suggesting that if they take a picture of it, if they have a phone, they can use the phone, they can hold a book up to a web camera and interacting with that text by capturing, you know, images, adding images or text to it, drawing where they're trying to make an emphasis of some sort. And so just making a visual connection. Again, we're just trying to activate that creativity to help them make some more meaning. And so engaging in something like this for most kids is more engaging for them than, you know, writing down words or vocabulary of some sort. So again, getting that visual representation, utilizing some different technology tools. And if I can find my mouse. So this is just one example, but there's a lot of different thinking routines that are out there. So again, if there's a routine that's out there, maybe one that you're already doing, looking at it differently and saying like, how can I add a design twist to it? And so in this particular routine, compass points, this is a routine that helps kids look at ideas or propositions and looking at them from different angles and different perspectives. And so it helps them to just explore different points of view, different sides to a situation. And so if you were to just do a search for this particular routine, you would have the north, south, east, west, where your north is what might the characters need to know as the story continues. S for stating your opinion about what the characters will come up with. E for what excites you about the character. W for what worries you about the next steps for this character. And so if we take that same thinking routine and just add a twist to it, a little design twist to it, same routine, but now through the lens of a maker. And so for N now, noticing what else did you notice that's connected to the interactions in the text? So pointing out and pulling out some different quotes. That might be something you do a book snap with. Sketching out using the strategy of sketch noting or sketch doodling on things that they're reading to show what their thinking is. E for empathy, we mentioned that briefly in the design thinking, but looking at things and designing things with the character in mind from what their needs are, not what your needs are. And then our W would be, what are you still wondering about? And so, and a lot of those things too, you can bring in some digital media for how they convey what they're thinking, as opposed to just traditional paper pencil. An activity that we're going to engage you guys in is with visual vocabulary. So again, we're looking at making our thinking visible. So we've all probably done vocabulary in some way with our kids. But oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this as a classroom teacher too, I'm the one pulling out the words. And so I've made the choice of what words they need to know. And so in this case, for our example, I've done that with this book, The Elves and the Shoemaker. These were some of the words that were pulled out of there, but ideally it would be a word that as your students were reading, and you might challenge them to find a word that maybe elicited an emotion in them, or maybe it was a word that they didn't know. So they're pulling out the words. And so what we're going to do is visually represent that word. So if we had the perfect situation right now, you would all be in front of scraps and materials and some items that you could make with. But because we're not, we're inviting you to use paper, pencil, if you've got markers and paper, something to draw with. And so what we're going to ask is that you take, and I'll come back to this screen in just a moment, but you're going to take one of those words and you're going to draw something to visually represent what that word means. And so again, I'll go back to the words in a minute, but what we're trying to do here is get the kids to not only learn by doing, but to make something abstract concrete. And we know that if they're involved in the process, they're more likely to remember it. So again, using paper, pencil, marker, anything that you have around you to draw or write, take one of these words, not that word, these words, and visually represent it. And we'll give you a minute or two to do that. And then we're going to unshare and give you a chance to hold up and share your visual representation of that word. And as always, if there's any questions, please add them to the chat or unmute. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And do we have one or two people who would like to share what they drew? And again, ideally, you guys would have things to, you would have the option of creating something three-dimensionally. Oh, awesome. Thank you. So Vicki, can you unmute and just explain your word and what you drew?
I'm always the first to draw in my class because I'm the worst artist there is. And they laugh at me so much that they know they can do better. And this is trying to be speed buggy. Do you remember the speed buggy? And it sputtered. So this is a best attempt at sputtered.
That
just popping.
That is really creative.
It's just terrible, but
no,
they're like, oh, I can do this. I can do this.
You can, and you did.
So they think that when I'm done.
You've not only created a visual representation for yourself, but you've done that for us too. So now I will always think of that buggy when I see the word sputtered. Do we have someone else that would be willing to share your creation? Oh, thanks, Rebecca. Can you unmute and, oh yes, that is.
Sure. This is my depiction of astonished here.
That is astonished. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for engaging in that. You know, as you guys understand and you've lived this world, like we've obviously modified it for both time and materials right now for this activity, but in your classroom, you know, to engage in things like this, where you're already doing vocabulary, again, we challenge you to put a design twist to it and think creatively, and it gives them, and it doesn't have to be long, it can just be a few minutes, because the other thing about creativity, which sometimes seems like an oxymoron, is that if you put some creative constraints on it and say, you know, this is what you need you to do, you've got X amount of minutes, but you can only use these things, that actually ignites more creativity than leaving it just open-ended without any of those constraints. And so this doesn't have to be a really involved, and if it just becomes a part of your practice, you know, just as Vicki and Rebecca shared theirs, they're not only going to remember those words because of that concrete experience, but their classmates are going to be making some connections as well. And then Laura, I'll pass it back to you.
I also drew sputtered, but of course my brain went to someone who's sputtering to talk. So the word was spilling out of the person's mouth. I loved this activity because I think of all those very dull vocabulary exercises I've either conducted in a classroom for my students or had to do as a student at some point or another. Another idea that you can employ is a maker notebook. We just did this actually with adult learners last week, but as they were encountering some new information, we routinely had them stop and sketch where they were in thinking about the new concepts that they were learning and then to add on. So we kept giving them an opportunity so that hopefully by the end of the 3 days, they had a real picture in front of them of what disciplinary literacy in this case looked like in their classroom. So of course you can have students, generate ideas, questions, sketches, reflections, and that leads to the next one. I often think that reflection is kind of where we miss our mark as educators. We don't build in that time for reflection, but research tells us that that's really where they make that transfer thinking happen. So if they stop for a second and think, would you do this or a similar maker project again, why or why not? It helps them kind of bring back some of those ideas as they encounter something that's similar or apply it in another classroom. So even just asking them simple things like, what are your strengths? What positives do you take away from this experience? Or if you had to do this again, what would you do differently? Really helps them to kind of bring that learning full circle. And like I said, whether it's in a notebook like we just looked at, or it's just something verbal, or they jot it down on a sticky note or whatever they do, it really is that moment where, think about our own experiences. Every time I get in my car at the end of the day, I reflect. I wish I would have done this differently. I really like the way this went. So it's giving them some of that same time and opportunity. And then this will be a kind of a series of book talks here between Judy and I, but we've got books where you can give students a maker challenge associated with what's happening in that book. So you're giving them time to think, to write, to make, and to reflect. But this cute, adorable book, really, it's about these squirrels who, of course, are convinced that they're going to get the bird feeder food. So they've thought of all these different ways that they can get up to this. And of course, you can see from the main character, they're annoying. He likes the birds. That's why he has bird feeders. So the question would be, how could you design a squirrel proof bird feeder? So you give the kids an opportunity to think about what they know about the story, what they know about the character, what they could design, what would make it more functional, what features they might add. So all of that helps them to kind of take that story in another direction. But of course, too, they're writing and they're making, they're reflecting, they're thinking. So all of those.
This is a bird feeder.
We've got a little video attached, but I won't share it right now. Another one would be with the elves and the shoemaker. So we know that the elves are staying up all night designing shoes so that the shoemaker won't have to, he wakes up in the morning and voila, look at all of these things that have been created while I slept. But take a, kind of a turn on it. How could this, your students design a shoe for one of the elves? So the elves come into that little workshop space and there are some shoes for them. And what would those shoes look like? And how would they be functional? Certainly if I were the elf, it would not have a heel like the one we see in the picture. And then we've got Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel. So again, a challenge might be a way to get Mike out of that hole. What could kids think about? Would it be a ramp? Would it be a pulley? Would it be some kind of a very, very large elevator? But again, they're thinking through that. And if they've got an opportunity to design it, to draw it out, then they can think about what kinds of things they would need to make it. Of course, we've got our Mo Willems series with the pigeon in the bus and the pigeon doing a lot of other things that all fall into the category of bad behavior. But what about creating a bus that the pigeon can drive? So what would the kids have to can, think through and conceptualize to make a functional pigeon bus. Well, something that the pigeon can drive in. I guess they have a whole set of pigeon passengers. And with wild things where the wild things are, maybe something as simple as creating a tent for Max and the wild things to share. Maybe the kind of disappointed mom would be in the background of that design, with a plate full of hot dinner waiting for Max when he pulled his act together. But again, these are just, very familiar stories. And often we know in literacy instruction, we ask questions about content when we're doing a read aloud. We share vocabulary words. We might have a turn and talk or a think, pair, share. Maybe we'll even involve some writing, but this takes it in a different direction. And I think about one thing that always comes to my mind when I think about these is making a diorama. I believe it was in late elementary school to illustrate something from the Revolutionary War, but I still think about that diorama. I was out sawing little pieces of wood to make a log cabin, and it still comes back to me when I think about a time where I had free reign. What do you want to create to illustrate what we learned about this? And another familiar one is our old lady who swallowed a fly. So what kind of device would make it so these animals do not get into the mouth of this poor old lady who I'm sure her lips were quite stretched by the end of the story. But, again, just some thoughts there to stimulate their thinking a little further and giving them something to do that really diverges from the types of things we always do. And I'm going to stop sharing here and give it over to Judy.
Okay. So to pick up where Laura left off, we have Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, who happens to be a donkey that can't believe his luck, and he finds a magic pebble one day that makes all his wishes come true, but much to his chagrin, he made a panic for his safety, he made a poor choice for the wish that he made. And so it has some consequences that he didn't expect. And so in this particular challenge, to have him create a foolproof safe for his magic pebble, because it's a very valuable pebble that he needs in order to restore himself back to himself as a donkey. And like Laura was mentioning too, with some of these different design considerations, this is a really great opportunity for kids to be designing not for themselves, but for the end user, and also taking it through that design thinking process of going through different iterations on how they can make it better and how they can make improvements upon it. So many of you have probably heard about Rube Goldberg, but here's his story. So he actually started out as an engineer and was a very good engineer, but it just wasn't fulfilling for him. And so he was very creative. He liked to draw and to illustrate. And so he stepped away from his engineering job to become a cartoonist. And combining his creative energy with his engineering mind, he came up with putting together these contraptions that really are all about cause and effect, that take sort of a simple problem, a simple task, and make it complicated through this chain reaction of events and different contraptions. So this is a beautifully illustrated story, but this is a great way to get kids thinking creatively and bringing in some of that engineering thinking as well, and identifying a simple task. And we've just got some bulleted here as some suggestions, but then encouraging kids to build a machine that will do that specific task. I know if you just do any type of searching, there's been so many creative ones that are out there, but they don't have to be huge and robust. They can be small and be creative. And so this is a great one to do that with as well. And so Techy the penguin is a character in a handful of books, but in this particular one, he has some habits that are a little different, but his habits end up being very helpful in escaping the hunters. And so your challenge here is to create a hideout for him to hide from the hunters. And again, taking all these design considerations in mind. And then if I built a house, it's actually, there's a couple of them now as a series, but you've got your main character here who is just full of energy and ingenuity and creativity. And and an imagination that's quite wild. And so he adds all kinds of imaginative features to his house. And so your challenge then would be to create a model, a prototype of a smart home with features for your dream home. And so this is a really great one to just get those budding inventors thinking differently. And this one is around if I built a house, but there's also if I built a car, if I built a school. So you can add those design twists, onto those to build something new and different. After the fall is a twist on the Humpty Dumpty story. And so after Humpty falls off the wall, he's quite nervous and afraid to climb back up, but he is determined and nothing is going to stop him, not even the birds. And so your challenge in this case, of course, looking through the lens of Humpty himself, is to create another way for Humpty to get down safely from the wall, because falling was not an option, not something he wants to do again. Pete the cat, again, there's a lot in this series, but this is one of them. So in this particular one with his groovy buttons, he loves his buttons and he loves his shirt buttons so much so that he sings about them and he makes a song about them until one pops off one by one and he's sad, but he still finds a reason to sing. And so you can help Pete out with the challenge of creating a button container to help keep all of his buttons safe. And the last example here is Toughboris, and he's kind of a mean, greedy, stereotypical angry pirate. He's tough, but is he really? Does he have a soft spot inside of him? And even tough pirates cry sometimes. And so when his parrot dies, that was his friend, and you see a different side of him. And so your challenge here is to help him not lose all his favorite things that are materialistic in nature, or not, but to create a backpack for him to carry some of those favorite things that he has with design considerations. And so what Laura and I would like to do now is to give you an opportunity to share some ideas that you might have. And so what we have here is a collaborative slide deck that just has blank slides on it that look similar to what we just shared, except for you're going to fill in a book title and grab a book jacket cover of it, and then come up with a challenge. So again, know the story, look at what might be a problem in the story and put a twist on it and make it into an open-ended challenge and what might be some design considerations. And so if we can do this collaboratively, we will be adding to the bank of ideas for everybody, and we'll show you at the end where we'll curate all those ideas so that you have them past this webinar right now. But Laura will put it in the chat, but again, we're going to actually put you into breakout rooms to take about 15 minutes to take a blank slide, add your ideas, but you'll be in a smaller group so that you can talk about it and share your ideas within your smaller group. And then when we come back as a whole group, we'll share a few of them with everybody. But again, the idea here is to get you thinking differently, get you thinking creatively, and then ultimately we will be growing a nice collection of ideas that all of you can take back with you to your classroom. So with that, Laura, is there anything else?
Okay, so we've got your beautiful slides here that you've created, kind of thinking along the lines of the ones that we displayed to you, just give you some kind of ideas about thinking about these picture books and how you can present students with a challenge and get them to think and write and make and reflect. So I'm not sure, we didn't have a name on the slides, but whoever added counting on Catherine, would you like to share?
That was me. I'm new to this. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm trying this. So kind of Catherine, my goal for the kids for this challenge is to help use materials to help Catherine design something to help Apollo come home.
I love that. And honestly, I think Apollo 13 is my all-time favorite movie. And maybe that is what I have never realized. The reason I love it so much is what Gary Sinise's character does to get them back. And again, probably a different, a context, or like just thinking of it a little differently, but I love that. And then I think along very similar lines, we have Hidden Figures. And would someone like to share about that one?
That was me, Michelle Kramer. And it's funny because the previous person and I were in our breakout room together. So, and we chose them and then started talking about them. So yeah, similar thing. Use any materials provided, and some of the things I like to do are just use household materials, household supplies. Especially when we were virtual last year, it was so easy for the kids. A lot of my students started to have their own like supply box at home, and they would tell me like, oh, I'm starting to collect stuff on my own, so I have it for next week, whatever we're using. So just, Q-tips and cotton balls, straws, cardboard, shoe boxes, toothpicks, anything like that. And then they come up with some amazing things just with the household materials.
I love that idea. And if you've been in a workshop with Judy, that's like the most fun, is you have all these little trinkets and gadgets and things that maybe by themselves wouldn't look like anything that unique, but once you start playing around with them, what you can make is, limitless.
Oh yeah, that's where I learned all my tricks, from Judy.
And then we've got the Princess and the Pea Challenge.
Actually, that was we did it as a whole group. So that was myself, Rebecca, and Chelsea. So we took a fairy tale because we found out Chelsea and I teach second grade. Rebecca teaches creative writing, and I'm sorry, Rebecca, what grade was it again? I know it's middle school or high school?
I'm at a high school.
High school. So two different ideas here, but we found out, or two different grade levels, but we found out fairy tales really lend the ability to be able to teach across age groups. So the Princess and the Pea, this is one that I've done in my classroom. So after reading it, they have to design a mattress where they wouldn't feel a marble underneath. And we kind of went back and forth. There's many different materials you can use. So we gave some ideas there. We also talked about giving the students the same 5 materials and they have to use those, or just allowing them to free build with whatever they have. I've done it both ways, and they both have great results out of both. So
it's fantastic. And, just that idea that fairy tales are just something that a lot of times kids know without even before we ever start reading to them. So they have some familiarity with how that genre works and what types of things might need to be in place for, there's magic and there's fairies and there's all kinds of things that they can also employ as they think about what that design might be. And then we've got one last one, and that is our, I'm not gonna be able to pronounce it, Vicki, so I'm gonna hand it over to you.
It's just Sylvester and the Magic Stone. So someone looked it up for me. I didn't even pull this up. My partner did. That was very cool. Sylvester y la Piedra Mágica. I used it as very advanced in Spanish 5-6, 4-5. And it has lots of conditional, and it has lots of subjunctive, which I was very grammar oriented last year because that's what I could actually get through to the kids, but it's not the fun stuff. If I could do it again, which I will, because it's an amazing book, we thought it'd be cool. Hey, we had stuff written on it. I wrote, can I share my screen? Where I filled this all in. I wonder why it's not filled in on your slide.
Oh, there it goes. Is that what?
Yeah, there. Yeah. To create a safe to harbor the magic pebble, a safe, and tell why it's safe, because all they're going to do is draw a box if you don't tell them why. And then we thought, and someone else in the group said, who was it that said it? I don't have to be the talker. I always am though.
It was me. We use iQuest, how water shapes our world. And I teach 6th grade self-contained, but we're over 80% ELL. So I just thought something like a comparison of, we were saying, well, what are the different types of rocks? And does one have more minerals? Just getting them to do a little bit of exploration and investigation on that, but also maybe some design thing about what would be your recipe for a type of soup. Just getting some basics about using common names of vegetables and household supplies.
Fantastic. And I mean, just in doing this little exercise, you can see how just taking something that is familiar to your classroom instruction, but putting that little twist on it. I mean, it's even fun for us to think about what we could do differently to get our students to engage with the story. And and remember it. Keep at the forefront the things that they learned while they were designing and making. And then we just thought at this point, we've got such a small group. It'd be nice to just have you unmute and share ways that you think you could make sure that this is, I know somebody added in the beginning, just being conscious of this, thinking, I think it was you, Vicki, just that idea that it brings the enjoyment of school back, that joy in the learning process. So what are some other ways that you can ensure that you're going to get your students to think, engage, and create in your classrooms in the coming year, which is coming very quickly now, right? We've only got a couple of weeks.
My I gave a survey to my kids the last day of school, my highest level kids, because they actually put thought into it. And they felt like robots. They said, all people want us to do is finish our homework. Nothing's fun. We don't do anything except homework. And I'm like, that's so sad. We have to do more fun. They're like, there's no games except Quizlet, or it's just not fun. And I'm like, I feel you. That was my pain too.
I think one of the things too that's most important is making whatever design challenge you're doing, or if you're trying to do a design challenge, making it relevant to something that they are doing at their school. When we were in the breakout room, I was saying that our school was under construction this whole summer. So we had to pack up every single thing from our school, put it in boxes, and we're getting, new lockers and new flooring and new heating and cooling and all that kind of thing. So at the end of the year last year, I did a design project with the young 5th through 4th graders where we read the book, If I Built a School. And we talked about how how we know that our whole school is going to be under construction all summer. And if you were in charge this summer and you could do anything to the school, and it doesn't have to be our school, it doesn't have to be, realistic, it can be out of this world and crazy. You could have a roller coaster in the middle of your school, or you could make it more realistic. Like, I'm in 2nd grade, I'm going into 3rd grade next year. I really hope my 3rd grade classroom would have this. And so then they got to design after we read the book, and it was very relevant to what we were doing and what they all knew was going on at our school during the summer. So they got really excited about it. So anything that's relevant to your school or their life or something that's going on right now, I think resonates with them so much more.
I agree. Anyone else want to share?
Well, I personally like the idea. I teach all subjects, and I think it's very regimented. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's a notebook for this content area. There's a notebook for this one. And these kids they just had such a horrible 18 months. Like, let's try something new. So I think for them to sit down and see something that's labeled Maker Notebook, and all these options of different things they get to do. So I think it's a new opportunity to try something new. So that's my plan. And I already got these, I don't know who ordered them, but I went to my classroom and there were tiny notebooks, some weird square shaped ones I'd never seen before, and then the general ones. And I thought, let's just break out something new, make it untraditional, but I'm going to do Maker Notebooks for whatever design thinking we do across the curriculum.
That's a great idea. And I know before we end today, we wanted to share a couple of additional resources. I'm going to put the slide deck and our resources links into the chat. But one of the things that Judy's going to show you right now is Wakelet, which I don't know if some of you have used it before, but just an incredible resource, I guess, tool.
Yeah. So like Laura said, we tried to curate a lot of different resources for you. And so behind every one of these images are additional resources. And so some maker challenges, some storyboards and things of that nature. But the one that we want to show you particularly is the books and design challenge. And so what will hopefully look familiar are the books that you see right here, because these are the ones that we shared with you earlier. And if you click on any one of those, it'll take you directly to the card related to that book with the design challenge on it. And so what our hope is that for those of you guys who did finish your slides here, we're going to add those to the Wakelet. if you did not finish an idea here, or you've just come up with an idea, or you come up with an idea in a couple days from now, Laura and I would love if you would continue to add to that slide deck as you come up with ideas, because then what we'll do is add them to this Wakelet with the idea of building this repository of ideas. And what you might find, again, depending on your content, depending on what your grade level, is that, you know, the idea that's behind the book jacket cover might be perfect fit, or it might be something that you need to adjust to scale it up or down and be more in line with the needs of your students. But we would love to grow this collection to be even more. So we wanted to make sure we pointed that out to you. And again, when you get some time, if you explore behind each of these individual collections, there's many more resources there that will be helpful for you as you either jump into this world of making, or someone like Michelle, who I know has been doing making for a while, there might be some new ideas here for her as well. So with that, we're down to the last couple minutes. We just want to remind you, and I think Laura alluded to this earlier, that there are still a variety of workshops left in the Summer Learning Blitz. So if there is something that is of interest to you that you have not yet registered, it's not too late. So please feel free to do that. And we just want to thank you guys for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. So we are here if there is some additional comments or questions that you might have, but we just thank you. And this was a great conversation. We learned from you as well. And Laura, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Just thank you so much. It was a little bit longer than some of our other sessions, but we thought it'd be fun for you to have a little time to think about how you could make. So thank you so much for joining us today.